I don't know what the situation is going to be like in 25 years or 50 years. I don't even know what the situation is likely to be in the West in that period. What we're discussing is something much more specific. Likewise, we're not suggesting, or certainly I'm not suggesting, and the motion is not suggesting, that what happens in China and the arrangements that are appropriate for China in this period should be transplanted into our own societies. I would not argue that for a moment. In fact, on the contrary, I would say that the reason Western democracies have grown up in the West has been because of the history and the culture of our societies. And we need to pay due respect, I would suggest, to China and the differences of its history and culture in the same way. What this motion is about is a country which is a developing country, which in the middle of the 20th century was extremely poor, which had suffered 200 years, during a 200-year period, of more or less, and I mean this literally, economic stagnation. Its GDP at the end of this period was more or less the same as it was in the first part of the 19th century. And it had been invaded and partially colonized by many countries, including our own. In 1949, China was a mess and a basket case. And the task that confronted China was how, with this vast country, could they transform it? And they made quite a few false moves and false starts. So when Deng Xiaoping came to power in 1978, he identified the two crucial tasks of China. The first was an overwhelming focus on the need for economic growth, and secondly, intimately tied to that, was the need for a huge reduction in poverty in a poverty-stricken country. At that time in 1978, the Chinese economy was 1/20th of the size of the American economy. And since that move from the end of the 70s in the direction of economic reform, we have seen the most remarkable economic transformation in human history. A population of 1.3 billion people, 1/5 of humanity, its economy growing at 10% a year, to the point where, today, the Chinese economy is half the size of the American economy. And there's a general view now that the Chinese economy will overtake the American economy in size around about 2018. This is truly remarkable. And I want to correct you, Anson, because it's just not true that the British experience or the American experience of industrialization in any way compares with the Chinese achievement. The British Industrial Revolution between 1780 and 1830, which was the key period, or you can push it to 1840, the growth rate was around about, on average, 1.5% a year. 1.5% a year. And that was a population of, 20, 30 million at that time, probably more like 20 million at that time. Or take America. You mentioned America. Well, the period between the end of the Civil War, the mid-1860s, to 1914, the American growth rate never exceeded, on average, something like 3.5%. And that, of course, again, was a much smaller population. So that is why I suggest that this is the most remarkable economic transformation there has ever been. And it has been presided over by the Chinese government. And it has lifted, I mean, let's remember this as well. If you look at the reduction in global poverty over the last 30 years, China is responsible for the overwhelming bulk of that reduction in poverty. If you take China out of the equation, actually the global performance has been very disappointing. Now, I challenge the view that the Chinese government does not enjoy the support of overwhelming mass of Chinese people.